I've been recording. Thank you for your
Great.
patience.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for those of us joining us in person. We've got a nice full house, and thank you for those of you joining us on Zoom. I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting is on Tuesday, October 24th at 7:30 p.m. in the Board of Education meeting room. A few comments. First, I would like to welcome Brenna Agarabi as our next student rep to the Board of Education. Brenna, welcome. Brenna is a junior up at Darien High School. I had the pleasure of meeting with Brenna, I think it's 7 a.m. last Friday morning. I will say the coffee is good up at the high school. Thank you. But thank you for meeting me that early in the morning with Dr. Adley. We had a great conversation. Do you want to take a minute and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about all the good stuff you're doing up at the high school?
Sure.
If you could bring that closer to you, that helps.
It's okay. I did theater. I can project.
Good, thank you.
Hi, I'm Brenna. I want to first of all thank you all for meeting here and giving me this wonderful opportunity to help this wonderful school district that I've really learned to grow into and learn to love. I've spent, let me think, the past 7 years in the school district. I moved here from Bronxville Public School District, where my mom's actually a high school English teacher. And I've really enjoyed it ever since. And I've just grown to so greatly appreciate, all the work that goes on behind the scenes, all the faculty, all of our, wonderful teachers, and, everyone that just kind of, makes the magic happen. And I'm so excited for these upcoming years. And yeah, I want to thank you all so much.
Well, thank you and welcome. I want to also welcome Robin Nelson. She joins our board. This is your first official meeting, so thank you. Thank you for going the process, and you've had a great history of volunteerism and service in the community and to our schools, so we welcome you to the board. Thank you very much for being here.
It's worth a round of applause.
Yes, absolutely. It's a round of applause evening, so that's good. I will also shout out to Katie Lublin and the Oxridge Building Committee. We had an official handover of the school from the town, subject to a formal vote, but we had a really nice ceremony Saturday morning in the beautiful gymnasium at the Oxridge Elementary School with kind of a semi-formal handover of the school in terms of care, control, and custody to the board, subject to the board and the town boards meeting and approving that. But thank you to all the members of the board, First Selectman Monica McNally and her team, former First Selectman Jamie Stevenson, our former rep Terry Wood, current rep Tracy Mara, and the building committee. Many members of the board were there, the public, and many members of the Oxford School. It's a beautiful school. As I said in my remarks, this town values education, continues to invest in education, not just from a curriculum and a technology standpoint, but from a facilities standpoint. I said, if I'm ever in a room again where someone's looking for people on a building committee, I will run out of that room rather quickly. But now we have Jill on HHR. So it truly is a testament to this town. It's a group of volunteers that stood up and delivered a building 5 years later from the ground up, really on time. And once the final accounting is done, I know it will be under budget. And as I said, I think Melissa Kay's compliment as a new principal up there and someone that's been part of buildings and other schools throughout her tenure as an educator. Aside from being a great looking building, she said it's incredibly functional. So I said, mission accomplished. In this day and age, you can build, you have the architects, you've got to always have some fun with them, with the look and feel of the building. But at the end of the day, to have an educator say it's incredibly functional, I say mission accomplished. So an incredible team. And thank you, Katie, behind the scenes with the parents and the community there, kind of organizing the ribbon cutting, which went off flawlessly. And it was held inside, which I think was kind of nice. We showed off the gymnasium and the stage up there, which was great. So the only other thing we had, there may be some folks speaking here this evening, which I think is great. We've had ongoing feedback from the community on the late start at Darien High School. I think that's important that we have that conversation. I think we need to set, expectations in terms of when that could occur. I think what the board will do, we'll look at the master agenda and see when that can come on in terms of looking at the master agenda. We'll look at that over the next couple of weeks. And I think, I'm not sure when the next conversation is about the master agenda, but I think just to set the right expectations, the work that would have to be done from an administrative standpoint and gathering information even from our neighbors that have done this is a lot of work as we move quickly into budget season. Also, a new board will be seated in November, and then we move right into budget season. So I think it will be more of a spring conversation that will play into kind of setting goals and objectives for next year, which leads into work that's done during our summer retreat. So I think that's a little bit of a timeline that the administration could work on in conjunction with the board. But we hear you. We think it's something that the board will look at in the administration, but there's a lot of work around it. So with that, Michelle, I will turn it over to you and public comment.
Good evening. If anyone in person would like to participate in public comment, please go up to the podium, wait for the chair to acknowledge you. You will have up to 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Brian Edgar, and I live at 30 Hilton Street. First, I'd just like to add my congratulations to Robin and to Brenna. Thank you for your willingness to serve on the board. I wish you a lot of good luck during your tenure. I think there's few occasions when your thunder gets stolen, but I'm here to talk about, I'm happy about it. I'm here to talk about school start time. So I'm here to ask the board to add an agenda item to one of its remaining meetings this year. That agenda item would be a presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding changing the start time at Darien High School to 8:30 a.m. I was encouraged by your comments tonight, Mr. Nadine, and of course at the last board meeting. I'm really glad the board has heard us. Including a later start time agenda item would get this process moving. Starting high school at 7:40 a.m. unnecessarily shortens the window where teens can get the sleep they need each day. If we assume that a high school student goes to bed at exactly 11 p.m. and wakes up at exactly 7 a.m., they could get the minimum 8 hours of sleep, but that's only the minimum. However, we know how unrealistic that schedule is. In fact, our own high school bus schedule proves it. Of the 9 morning high school buses, 7 have pickups before 7 a.m., the earliest being 6:46 a.m. In total, across all the high school morning bus routes, there are 33 bus stops with pickup times before 7 a.m. We know that adequate sleep is foundational to the mental, physical, and emotional health of our students. Again, starting high school at 7:40 a.m. does not provide the opportunity for our students to achieve the necessary sleep each day. 20 years ago, in the fall of 2003, Wilton changed its high school start time to 8:20 a.m. By all accounts, it's been a great success. More recently, Greenwich High School changed its start time to 8:30 a.m. We can learn from their experiences and implement this change in Darien sooner than later. At the previous board meeting, you heard that 175 parents have indicated their support for this change. As of today, just 14 days later, there are 309 parents that support a later start time at DHS. Awareness about this issue is growing. Support for this change is increasing too. When we see the successes of nearby towns implementing later start times and consider all the data and studies showing the benefits of starting high school later, don't we owe it to our students to make this change? It's time for Darien to change the start time at DHS to 8:30 a.m. Please make this a priority. Add it to your agenda so we can begin the work to make this change a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in public? Thank you. Michelle, anyone on Zoom?
If anyone on Zoom would like to participate in public comment, please use the raised hand icon. There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Adley.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for those who are attending this evening, both our staff and members of the community. I'd like to start off by recognizing an outstanding senior at the DHS High School, Annika Mangwell. We had the opportunity to meet with Annika just after we met with Brennan, actually. Annika is an art student, and she's also very much involved in medicine. She has this unique desire to combine medicine with her art. Jacqueline Zamas, who is her art teacher, is here this evening and has supported her through her journey thus far. A wee bit of a unique thing, since we're talking about some test scores this evening. Annika scored a perfect score in the 2023 AP Art. Absolute perfect score, which I believe is only the second person in Darien history to actually do that. A wee bit of a unique thing too. The reason I was meeting with Annika is that Annika will be helping the board and helping the administration. One of the items and agenda items that are on the strategic plan is to develop a district logo with a palette of colors and so on and so forth. That is what Annika is going to do. And she'll have a variety of eyes upon that, and the board will be able to see along the way too. So she's keen to do that work, and she stepped to the plate to do it, and she's already well on her way. So I will look forward to receiving her ideas and her rendition. She also is actually participating in, I think she drives one of our ambulances in town. She's a member of the American Heart Association. She works for them and advocates for them. She also was accepted to present at an international GM conference, and I think the GM is graphics and medicine. The unique thing is the people who said that she could be accepted into the presentation in the conference didn't know she was a high school student. So it's just absolutely remarkable. It's just an indication of the talent we have across the board in the arts and all sorts of domains. But I also just wanted to recognize that she is the student who will be working closely with the administration and the board in developing a Darien logo. I don't know if you know that we don't have a logo technically, but she'll work with K through 12 students, pre-K even through 12 students, staff, and members of the board to come up with that particular logo. So we thank her for that. We congratulate her on her achievements thus far. This is World National Health Day today. Across the world, countries across the world are recognizing that. Given what's happening in the world today, maybe it's hard to see that in some places, but thus even more the importance. I say that because Annika is also doing a mental health mural, which will be right beside the welcome desk. So she's got a lot of the bases covered. So we congratulate her on her achievements and recognition, both in her assessment and the AP test and the other areas of that she is pursuing. Like many of our students, multi-talented students. Also want to recognize we have a group of students, Darien High School commended students in the 2024 National Merit Scholarship program. We have 21 of the students. I won't read out all their names, but you may recognize some of them there. And if you want the names, I can certainly provide those. As Mr. Chairman mentioned, on Saturday, we had a wonderful opportunity. Sometimes these opportunities just sort of fly by and you don't just stop and realize what's going on in the district a little bit. But the celebration of that Ox Ridge community and the Ox Ridge new school, it's just unbelievable. And I will say to Mr. Chairman here, he doesn't normally say those things. He points to other people, but he is the co-chair of this particular committee and has been working closely alongside all and guiding that committee with his partner Kip Coons. And it's just a remarkable school. So if you didn't get a wee chance to see it, we can share some of it because some of it was taped and there's a lot of photographs that go around. The DHS track has been completed and it is beautiful. On Thursday evening this week, the Thriving Youth will be presenting their findings that were presented to the board at our last meeting. We're continuing to work administratively on the implications of the kindergarten legislation. So we'll bring that back to the board and we'll work through with have sessions for parents and so on and so forth. But we'll obviously come back to the board first before that. We cross our fingers for our Saturday Tokenique Carnival. I hope the rain, it seems like a rain every weekend this weather. October 22nd is the American Foundation Suicide Prevention Out of Darkness Walk. We will participate with members of the community during that time. Just a reminder to members of the board for the Cape Caps Convention. If you could get that information, if you're going to go, I'd like to submit the first round of that by Friday of this particular week, because get a wee bit of a break if you do that before Friday. So if you're interested in participating, let me know. A couple of people have already let me know, so you'll be signed up. Don't worry about which sessions per se, because you can change the sessions. It's just the days. Are you going to be there for 2 days? Or are you going to be there for 1 day or a half a day or otherwise? Upcoming meetings, we do have a policy committee meeting on the 13th here this week, and curriculum committee on the 12th, and the finance committee on the 19th, and the next facilities is in November.
Thank you, Dr. Atlett. We'll move on to the student representative report. Swaha.
Good evening. So at Darien High School right now, the student government is mostly preoccupied with planning our homecoming week, which is next week. And it's going to end with a pep rally on Friday and a bonfire Friday night, which during my time at Darien High School, this is the first time that we're trying that. So I'm excited. And student government is also planning to host our third trunk or treat at end of October. And the past 2 years, it's gone really well. We've gotten a lot of donations and a lot of kids showed up and clubs participated. So hopefully it's going to be like a continuing thing.
Good stuff. Brenna?
We also have a series of different athletic events. Monday, October 16th, we have girls soccer, 4 p.m. Wednesday, field hockey and girls volleyball, cross country. And Thursday, we have boys soccer. And on Friday, we have girls swimming and diving. And Saturday, we have the big football game, which should be super exciting. We also have a variety of things going on in the arts. All our DHS music ensembles just had our sort of like opening concert that is available for live stream if you want to go visit the DAF Media YouTube channel. Some really great performances all around. And Theater 308 will have tickets on sale for our fall drama, The Dining Room, on October 16th.
You have a role? Do you have a role?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
You're in the production?
Yeah.
Oh, great. All right. As I said, all across the board, there's just incredible talent in the theater, music, sports, in the day-to-day curriculum. So thank you. And welcome again to the board. Nice job. We'll move on to approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting and regular meeting held on September 26th, 2023. Sarah, second by Dennis. All those in favor, unanimous with everyone present. Thank you. We'll move on to any board committee reports. Jill?
The HHR has gone back out to bid, and we are looking forward to receiving numbers back towards the end of the month, beginning of November. And so we'll have more information for everyone in November.
Great, thank you. The other board committee reports, I know we have a couple of meetings coming up this week, so good. We will move on to presentations and discussions. We will report on testing, SBAC, SAT, ACT, AP, NGSS. Anyone that can say what all those acronyms are wins the day off. We will have Ms. Catherine Ostar, Dr. Fedigan, and Ms. Droller presenting. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
As mentioned, I'm Kathy Oster. I'm the new director of counseling, and I'm very excited to be here tonight with Julie to present the student achievement data report. I just picked this up. We're very proud of the wonderfully talented students, our deeply committed faculty, and our extremely supportive school leaders. Darien Public School once again delivered impressive results. These results are a clear reflection of the hard work of the students, the staff, and of a community who's obviously committed to supporting educational excellence. The presentation we have tonight reviews results from both state mandated testing in grades K-12 as well as optional testing at the high school. That optional testing is often used for college admissions if students choose to submit their scores. So we'll present this data in two parts. First, Julie will share the results of the state mandated K-8 testing, and then I will share the results of the high school.
Thank you, Kathy. Good evening again, everybody. I am here with my colleagues, and as we've done in previous years, we'll go through half of the presentation, Smarter Balance and NGSS, and then we'll pause for questions. We have Francis Janasco, Ronnie Rodier, and Christian Dalcom here to answer any questions, as well as myself. And then we'll go on to the second part with the high school results, if that's okay with everybody. So just a little overview about our summatives testing. Smarter Balance Assessment and Next Generation Science Assessment are given in the spring, as well as the Connecticut School Day SAT. We're going to talk about the SAT, ACT, Advanced Placement. And this year, we're also going to talk about the Seal of Biliteracy and provide our testing dates for next year. So we want to start off by talking about our Darien Public School Assessment Framework, just to contextualize this. So these are the different kinds of assessments that we give to our students. Universal screeners identify which students are not meeting benchmark and may require further diagnosis. Summative assessments, which we're going to talk about tonight, these are assessments of learning. So at the end of a chapter or a unit or a course, we see what content has been mastered by students. Formative assessment is in the moment assessment. It's assessment for learning. Those are the kind of assessments, questioning, classwork, exit tickets, performance tasks, on-demand writing, where teachers can actually pay attention to what students are doing and how they're responding to their learning, provide feedback, and adjust their instruction in real time. Also in real time are student self-assessments, checklists, goal setting, and peer conferences. So we felt like that was helpful to contextualize the presentation that we're going to talk about tonight. Smarter Balance Assessment, as you know, is administered in grades 3 through 8. It's a snapshot of student progress in English language arts and mathematics. Students receive an achievement level 1 through 4, where 3 is meeting expectations, 4 is exceeding, 2 is near, and a 1 is not meeting, and then an overall scale score. The scores represent the student's knowledge and skills within each content area. And there are 3 areas of knowledge and skills. In English language arts, it's listening, reading, writing, and research inquiry. In mathematics, it's concepts and procedures, problem solving and modeling and data analysis, and communicating reasoning. The test is computer adaptive, which means it adjusts to the student performance. So if students are answering the questions easily, they'll get more challenging. If they're struggling, they will become easier. Individual score reports were released on September, and there was a parent a video shared with parents who had questions about student scores. So these assessments, along with the other assessments that I just spoke about, provide us with a very comprehensive profile of student performance. So we're going to begin with math. These are our results from this year. These are our students who scored at or above goal. So they received a level 3 or 4. This is a 4-year trend. Oop, I'm sorry, this is our DERG comparison. So you could see where we are in relation to our neighboring colleagues in the DERG. Oops. For some reason, my slides are going out of order. This is a slide, I'm going to hand this out. Based on some questions, we added a few slides in. There's 3 slides there. So we were asked about historical data going back to 2015-16, which was the first year that these Smarter Balance assessments were administered. So we have all that data. There is an asterisk next to 2020, 21. We are cautioned by the state to not use those for comparisons because of the different learning models in person, hybrid, and remote. And I talked about our DIRT comparison. These are just some of our takeaways and our response. And again, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions and we can dig a little bit deeper, but there's a consistency of high achievement across multiple grades. We are at or around 80% for all of our grades, which is at the top of the state. Strong math performance over time. Several of our grades ranked among the top 3 in our DIRT. So we're proud of our students and our teachers. We are doing some cross grade level collaboration to share best practices. We've talked about our vertical teams, and this is something that we're really excited about. We are doing some deeper analysis into our 8th grade performance. We talked about that last year. There is an increase this year, but it is still our lowest score across all grades. And ongoing professional learning. This year we have Dr. Yeep Banhar, who is coming back to work with our teachers. So, you know, especially in areas of weakness and differentiation. In English language arts, you can see that our scores are a little bit more inconsistent, although again, we are still at the top of the state and at the top or in the middle of the DIRT. This is out, and I think I skipped a slide. I'm sorry. This is our 4-year trend, but this is another place where we added an additional slide based on a request for that history. So this is the 6-year data from 2015-16 all the way through this year. And here we are in the DIRT. So again, we are at the top of the DIRT or somewhere in the middle for all grades. So some of our takeaways for English language arts, again, as I said, varied performance across grades. We're especially proud of our performance in 5th grade. That has done consistently well. Grade 3 was likely impacted by the pandemic. I'll just remind you that those were the children that were in kindergarten when we shut down for COVID, and then 1st grade when we were back with hybrid and in person and wearing masks. So that definitely had an impact, not just here, but in all districts across the state. Grade 8 is showing improvement over time. And grade 6 and 7 are areas that we are looking into for improvement. So again, some of the things that we are doing, we're looking at vertical teams to analyze our data with 3rd grade. Compassionate and data-driven approach. So we know that those students have some social emotional needs as well. So we're looking closely at data to address that decrease, but a lot of small group instruction, a lot of relationship building, a lot of more one-on-one and small group to meet their needs, and ongoing professional development, particularly in our foundational literacy skills, not just for our primary teachers, but for all teachers, because we know that those students are now in 4th grade. Middlesex professional development, there's an emphasis on smarter balanced growth targets and differentiated instruction. So for the next generation science assessment, again, this is our percentage at or above goal. And our 4-year trend. So we are creeping back up to pre-pandemic. 2019 was the first year that the NGSS was administered. So we only have 4 years of data. Oops, sorry about that. And this is the DIRT comparison. So here again, some of our takeaways. There's a 3-year positive trend in scores in all grades. They have rebounded to pre-pandemic levels, and grades 8 and 11 are the highest in the past 3 years. That doesn't mean that we still have work to do in this area. Grade 11 performance compared to the DIRG is identified as a need to review. And one of the things that we're looking into is when and how our students are tested. In terms of our response, there's an analysis of building and grade level data to identify strengths and areas of growth, analysis of students who are performing below the expectations to identify trends in performance and any sequencing patterns at the high school. We are continuing to revise curricular units to support the integration of 3-dimensional learning and the next generation science standards. And at the middle school and the high school, teacher practice goals have been developed to focus on instructional practices that support this 3-dimensional learning. So I will pause there for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Joel. Dr. Fettigan. After you take your sip of water. Just your outside looking in view of the data at a high level.
On a high level, these scores, as Ms. Shoulder indicated, are really around, there are some of the assessment that really should inform that are really our day-to-day instruction. These scores come in where students have already passed on. So they're somewhat, they're dated. They're not as powerful for teachers to inform teaching and learning as formative assessments, which are for learning, what Ms. Shoulder was talking about before. I think some of the scores will give us some pause to look into the standard specific target areas, consider looking at how the curriculum matches or may have some gaps, and also maybe thinking about school sequence and pacing, how units are placed out. So I work with the curriculum team is addressing with curriculum, looking at writing, curriculum division. Will this be very instructive in this?
Great, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I'll open up to board questions. Katie.
Thank you. First, I just wanted to say, Dr. Fettigan, that I appreciate that you commenting about the importance of curriculum revision and looking into that. I noticed that that only appeared on the science slides, not on the math or the ELA, but from your comments, I take it to mean that you're looking at it holistically across all of the testing areas.
And that is correct. Part of our work, and that's aligned with the strategic plan, is really looking at curriculum, thinking about our curriculum cycle, thinking about our curriculum calendar for revision, and also thinking about how our work in the area of vision of the graduate may need to call for some revision to the curriculum.
Great, thank you. One just question about SBAC in particular. I was curious what steps might be taken when a student year over year, because they do take it annually over that period, when they have a drop. So what steps are followed up with individual families and students when their specific performance drops?
So this is one area of assessment that we would look at. And in practice, teams, SRBI teams or RTI teams in the elementary schools and at the middle school would be looking at the suite of assessments that are in a student's profile. We were talking about this actually this afternoon in our elementary leadership meeting. What types of data do we have on students? What data do we look at and for what purpose? So it would be our practice to look at student performance for students who have fallen behind grade level expectation prior to even the summative assessment reports being released. But this is another data point that we would consider in June and July when these scores are released for the teacher who will have the student the following school year. But we would want to triangulate this data with other data points, for example, like an Ames Web assessment or other unit assessments, other interim assessments that we have as a part of the curriculum. We wouldn't want to look at a data point in an isolated way. We want to look at the whole, comprehensive suite of assessment pieces that are in a student's profile.
I appreciate that. Since the SBAC scores do come out annually and they are, as you mentioned, from the prior year past, I was curious if there was discussion about sharing the ongoing Aimsweb scores with parents. My understanding is that current practice is that they're shared only by specific request as opposed to just automatically.
It's almost as if, Ms. Lublin, you were in our elementary leadership team meeting at 4:30, because this is another item that we discussed. I will defer to Ms. Stroller to help me in responding to this, because I'm still learning what the past practice has been with sharing some of these data points. And I would just caution that in doing so, be really important for us to discuss with any data point, any type of assessment, the rationale for the type of assessment and how it should be used. And most importantly, what it tells us about the student's next level of learning. So not what the student cannot do, but when we look at the standards and the targets for learning, what is the student working on next? That would be important information for not only teachers, but for parents, for example, to know at home.
And that has been our practice, has been just not to share that Aimsweb data. I'm not really sure that I have an answer to that. It's a universal screener, and I don't know how difficult it would be to share those reports. I don't know if they would have to be printed. I mean, there are probably multiple pages when they're printed. I don't know if that would have to be mailed out. But there is no reason why parents can't have that data. And it doesn't, it's a universal screener. So it really just tells us if students are meeting benchmark. If they're not, we do other diagnostic data that is way more informative. And probably because the majority of our students do so well, it's such a small percentage that don't meet the benchmark on those assessments.
So I would think we would want to kind of frame that in a discussion around not only what is the universal screener showing, but what are other assessments showing with regard to what the student is working on in their next level of literacy or mathematics, like in a learning progression. Because sometimes the score doesn't really just indicate that, right? What is the student working on next? If you look at a score in an isolated like percentage or a number, it's not as instructive to a teacher or a parent when you can think instead about what is the student's, again, next learning target. So that I think we would have to, I'm just cautioning, if we're looking at scores, we should also be looking at like related skills.
Makes sense. Jill.
As we look at numbers like these, I wondered if you could talk to us about how you are separating out what is curricular work and what is the unique experience of some of the kids who have gone through COVID. So for example, if I look at grade 8 mathematics, we are definitely looking at a big difference between 15, 16 and 22, 23. I would guess that there's a need for a look at some of the curricular aspects of that, kids who have been on that trajectory. But I also wonder, is there a way to isolate things that this particular cohort, whether it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, any of those folks, any of those kids, students have gone through, where we might need to remediate, and are there plans to actually look at specific types of remediation for gaps?
And that's usually where we look at individual student scores one year over the next to see who's, students that are where there's a dip, then we would look at other types of data. Mhm.
Okay, so you're
At
looking
more at an individual level.
You're looking, so then as a process, you take someone takes the SBAC for each child and compares it year over year?
Yes.
Okay. And then if there's a decline in performance, then there is a specific process for remediation?
Along, like Dr. Fettigan said, like in our comprehensive assessment system, we look at a multitude of assessments, but yes.
Okay.
So this is an important conversation because we do want to look at individual student performance over time, right? Sometimes there are increases and we want to see, what is supporting that. We also want to look where students may be dipping and provide really differentiated instruction. We can look at the SBA data and drill down into, again, like learning progressions and more concrete standards. That would be areas of focus for individual students. And then we can make small groups. That's happening at the middle school. I was talking to Dr. Dahlstrom earlier today about the process in the middle school. And it's very much parallel at the elementary school. But we're just looking at data from more than one, because this is one moment in time. So we want to look at what is the trend across other assessments throughout the previous year. Also in support of figuring out how to support the student.
So you mentioned small group instruction as one tool. I would imagine SRBR type interventions are another for a child who either is identified as needing them or already has them in place. Are there any other large tools in your toolbox that you're deploying? Again, I know that parents are very justifiably concerned about gaps in kids' learning. So just would love to be able to speak to what are.
Well, any student who doesn't meet, who doesn't score a level 3 or a 4, we're obviously looking carefully at that student, those students that aren't meeting benchmark. And I would say that there are very few surprises. We usually, they're usually on our radar. And again, we don't get much granular information from the Smarter Balance assessments, plus it's old data by the time the students are in our classroom. So that would be information that, hey, we need to look at this student. And we look at all of their data, and as Dr. Fetterman said, it's all of their, what are their areas of strength and what are the areas of growth, and what's the learning going to look like for that particular student.
Bob.
Thank you for the comments. I wanted to kind of follow up what.
Turn the mic up.
Just pull it right to you, actually. Robin.
There you go. Yeah, we're good.
I just wanted to follow up on what Jill was asking about a little bit more, because this, the 6-year trend graphs that you just distributed were really helpful, because for instance, when you look at grade 8 for math and then also grade 6 and 7 for English, the level that the students were at across the board in 2015-16, for instance, grade 8 was 90, and in this most recent year it was 76. And then for the English, it went from 86 or 89 to 75 and 77, the earliest year and then the most recent year. And so one question I have, obviously part of that I think is maybe COVID and some lost learning over the last few years, but even prior to COVID, it seems that something may have changed. I'm just wondering if was that a curricular change, or is there something that we're doing differently that might be causing some of that difference in the overall scores?
Hi, I'm Moni Bodier. I'm the new math chair.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for your question. And Jill, I think I can address a little bit what you were asking regarding curriculum. To repeat, we certainly right now we're doing an analysis at the grade level to identify strengths and areas of growth. But when Amy said we really drill down, we really do drill down into domains. So for math in particular, the domains are communication, reasoning, procedural knowledge, and data analysis. And to no surprise in Darien, procedural knowledge, we're strong, we're good. So embedding and integrating more reading and writing tasks in our opportunities really to support the communication, reasoning, and the data analysis sections of the test, that's where it's affecting our curriculum. And that's what we're doing now. We're really taking a deep dive into that, in addition to identifying individual students. Is that helpful? Also, our goals in professional learning this year are aligned with supporting opportunities for students to problem solve and engage in math in a similar way that presents itself on the Smarter Balanced Assessment. And the fact that everything is really focused and aligned, I think is a good start.
Sarah.
Thank you. So as everybody has said, these are a snapshot of a moment in time. And I think we need to be very cautious about how we speak about this data point representing a child. Each test is a snapshot of a moment in time. We all need to remember that. I am curious though about the more qualitative aspects of our students' performance. I'm not a data person. I like the more holistic student. So if you're looking, just taking this 90 in 2015 versus the 76 last year, do you see a big difference in those students? And is there, I know it's hard to generalize across an entire grade, but is there a difference in study habits? Is there a difference in the way that, attention span? Is there any difference in the students as a whole that might explain some of this?
I think it's a challenge for any student on any given day when they're taking a formalized assessment to persevere and struggle through difficult problems, whether it's in math or in English. I think we're certainly dealing with a different population of students who have other things going on outside of just academics in their mind. And we can see that sometimes when on a particular day and perhaps on a particular day during the test. It's just a snapshot.
Katie?
Francis?
And if I can jump
Yeah,
in
go,
too.
go Francis.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and I'll just,
Thank you.
I'll do my best to address that. Our teachers, and this may seem anecdotal, but I think there's some truth to this fact that we are having a harder time at the middle school supporting students' independent reading. We do reading logs. We have opportunities for students to share in small groups, and we do everything possible to promote it. We've had programs in place to support summer reading, but our teachers have struggled to foster an environment where kids really seek to read for pleasure. We're seeing, if you look at some of the sub-strands of, say, for the ELA scores, we have reading, writing, and listening. If you look in some of the sub-strands within reading, you can see across the board that vocabulary is something that we need to support at all three levels. It's the only thing that connects all three levels in terms of the scores that you're seeing tonight. So it's something that we don't particularly have the answer for right now, but we're trying our best to come up with remedies and initiatives that support independent reading outside of the classroom.
Thank you. Katie?
Thank you. I just wanted to come back to some of the data that's in there and point out that while I understand there's a snapshot in time and that individual students, I want to make sure that we're looking at the data from multiple angles to really understand all the things that it can tell us. For example, when we're looking at the chart on ELA, if we just look from 2021 to 2022 and we go up a grade, then we can see that almost all of these grades, which are the same kids, are dropping year over year. So if you look at grade 4 and 21, they were at 81%. This past year at 22, well, that was a bad example. They went the other way. But if you skip down, it's basically from 5 to 7, right? We go 85 to 75, 80 to 77, 81 to 83. So those are, I think, trends that are important for us to look at when we're talking about curriculum, when we're talking about things like Mr. Janasco is pointing out what's happening in the classroom. What our individual student follow-up with is an individual thing. But I do think it's important that we move these things around. Just two other quick points. I wanted to just also highlight the importance of noticing that grade 3 is where we hear across the board about an important line in the sand about what kids' future success is. And, our current statistics on grade 3, which are now 4th graders, they were the kindergarten COVID babies. And we can't ignore that, but we don't have a lot of time left and we need to really focus on that. So I hope that is of importance. And then my final question is, what does a compassionate approach mean in terms of that particular age as well?
Yeah, just understanding the needs of those children that they missed, what they went through. I mean, they were in kindergarten, they were babies when school shut down, and then they came back in 1st grade. Those are such critical times of learning, and school was hybrid. Their teachers were in masks. We were all so scared. Teachers were scared. Their parents were scared. There were things going on in their family. That definitely impacted that cohort. And we see things in students' stress level and anxiety and even behavior. So just knowing that, making sure that the classroom is a safe and supportive community, and focusing on the whole child.
But just not to the point that we're giving them a pass on any hard
Of course.
skills.
And actually, I have to say, we're very proud of our 3rd grade. I mean, we are like number 2 in the DERG and at the very top of the state. So even though, that 76%. I would love to see it higher, but we are, I mean, that really is the top. So I'm proud of our teachers and our students.
Julie.
I'm jumping back to math quick, and I know we've talked about how the grade 8 math scores do tend to dip some, although we did go up this year, which is great. And now looking at the 6-year trend, I was just curious, this was an idea that was floated last year, but I know we talked about the possibility of testing fatigue. 8th graders are ready to be finished with middle school. They're not really psyched for another long test, understood. But also the idea that we may have a number of 8th graders who are being tested on material that they covered in 7th grade or 6th grade. And I'm curious, and we may not know the answer this moment, but I'm curious if that number of students who are accelerated has increased over the years, and if that may contribute to the decline in 8th grade across the board, and if that's something we need to think about, how that impacts.
Yeah, and I agree. It's definitely something we definitely take a closer look at. It's something we're definitely going to take a closer look at. I think that's accurate. Thank you.
Dennis.
But I read the data differently in that, because if I look at, if we go, and thank you very much for this 6-year projection. I think it's been most helpful to kind of go through and understand, because COVID's right in the middle of this, so it's very helpful. But if I look at 15, 16, so, you know, we went 90, 85, 79, which is all in line. And then all of a sudden we go, you know, if you compare it, and again, even if you compare grade 3 to grade 8, I realize it's not the same comparison. I'm going 82, 90, 81, 85, 85, 79. But then you go the last 3 years, it's 85, 71, 84, 71, 81, 70. It's a huge difference between pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. So I don't think it's and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not sure that it's just a fatigue factor of 8th graders, because they weren't fatigued before COVID and now they are. That seems like a strange conclusion to me. And I'm not sure the data supports that. And as well as I think Katie brought up a great point, because to me, when you read across from, and I wish we had these up, when you read across the grades and you expect to see improvement from grade 3 to grade 4 to grade 5 to grade 6, and you don't, you're seeing, you know, 86 to 77 to 81 to 80, I guess that's some improvement, but it's fluctuating. It's not as consistent as it was pre-pandemic, where you could see at least consistency, and if not improvement.
One thing I can comment on that, and accurate.
And it's both, and sorry to interrupt, it's both reading and mathematics as well.
Yeah, I can say that, I'm sure I'm saying something you already know, but 2015 was the first year of this exam. And typically when you roll out, especially standardized exam, it's finite, the number of problems. And over years, it just keeps adding on like any other standardized test. And it's possible that as the years have gone on, that things have become more difficult because the pool of problems is just that much more deep.
Dave.
So that's possible. Is there any way we can prove that or find that out with the data, or is it just positive in any way?
Well, what I can say is that we have more available for us to practice than what we did before. So our tools that we have in order to help students and what we look at and what they're testing is much more than what it was the years prior.
Got it. And then just to follow up, looking at the English Language Arts SBA slide. So Dr. Fettigan, I was very happy to hear that we're doing more than just doing PD, but we're actually going to be looking at curriculum. And then dive deeper on that, looking at curriculum, you were talking about vocabulary. You mentioned vocabulary coming from reading. Are there other ways to teach vocabulary?
Yes. Yes, I appreciate the question. And if you were to look back at my curriculum committee presentation from just last year, we introduced vocabulary building mini lessons in English A, which is our 6th grade reading class. And the focus there has been on academic language, not say text-specific language, but academic language that students are going to use even across the grade levels in different subject areas, not just in ELA. So that's where we're starting. We're going to do more with it. And, you know, obviously we do direct instruction with it. We do a lot of activities that are designed for focusing on word consciousness. We're looking at etymologies of words. We're looking at root words. We're doing all kinds of things to promote vocabulary acquisition.
And so is there a rollout plan in mind at this time?
A rollout plan, say that again, please?
Do you have a rollout plan? Are we going to other grades? Are we expanding into different areas? Like what's sort of the plan?
Yeah, I mean, basically, what we have discovered based on kind of looking within that reading subscore, that we have a need for that. There wasn't really a plan, but seeing the results of this past year, this is something that we're going to be doing.
Got it. And I guess following up to Katie's question, third grade being an inflection point, are we going to be moving this form of instruction down to third graders or other grades as well, kindergartners?
Yeah, that is part of our literacy instruction as well.
Okay. And then I guess the other follow-up I would have would go not just to vocabulary, but to grammar. And certainly I think as we look through this, Dr. Fettigan, I certainly hope you'll have the curriculum committee involved as we discuss that. Also, given some of the changes that have gone on in Teachers College, I think that would be a very useful exercise for the curriculum committee to look at in some depth. It's the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. We agree, and there is an update planned in the early spring that will touch base on English language arts, and that will, of course, not just be secondary. It'll be a look at where I'm trying to drive ELP to grade 12 with a long-term view over curriculum across grades, and really looking for that articulation across the grades in those areas that you named.
So I'm looking forward to that. And if we can do anything sooner on the subcommittee, that sounds great to do an even deeper dive.
Duly noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis.
Yep. So Dr. Fettigan, something's bothering me with what you said, and maybe I misinterpreted, but what I heard is we're going to change the curriculum to help get better test scores. Was that correct, or did I misinterpret what you said?
No, so there are standards, and so we need to take a look at the standards. And so it's not really about the test score, it's teaching to the standard. I'm glad that you're pointing that out. And really looking at the curriculum as it exists. And where are the standards addressed within the curriculum? And sometimes it may be, I think Ms. Best was pointing this out, a pacing issue. We want students' experiences to be cumulative and then for them to be able to perform at the end of the year on an assessment, because that's about mastery. And so when we look at scores like this, we have to also look at the curriculum and think about when are we pacing things in a student's given year and try to look for trends. Ms. McCammon was asking about individual student performance, and she was indicating, I think, that we do look at the data that way, but we also look for trends across the district to inform curriculum revision. So it is not about teaching to the test. And I think this district is very well positioned with the vision of the graduate to be thinking about what are the other college and career post-secondary skills that we need to be focusing on. Because at the end of all of this, while test scores are important, very few and far between people are going to ask a student if they can take a test well, right? And many colleges are even going to the test optional. So we recognize that we want students to perform at very high levels to these standards, and these standardized assessments do matter. We also want to make sure that we're focusing on those elements of the vision of the graduate. And there's some crossover between those and standardized assessments, but it's just not the full picture. We want to be considering both in our curriculum development.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
On to the next. Thank you.
So the high school testing is going to focus on the Connecticut SAT school day, the national SAT and ACT scores, and the results of the advanced placement exams. I'd like to point out that we'll be discussing two different data sets for the SAT. The Connecticut SAT school day, which is mandated by the state of Connecticut for juniors, is our current seniors. They took the SAT in the spring of last year, but when we're looking at the national data for the SAT and the ACT, those scores are from the class of 2023. We're also going to share information about the advanced placement exams. As you know, advanced placement tests are given in May. It's 2 wonderful weeks in May. Our AP students prepare for many of those exams through classes, but it's not required that a student takes an exam if they're in an AP class, nor is it required for them to be in an AP class to take the exam. Some students self-study. So the Connecticut SAT School Day was administered digitally during the school day on March 22nd, 2023. The test assesses evidence-based reading and writing and math. As you can see, our juniors took the test and our scores are strong. They're above the DERG average and well above the state average. Almost 90% of our students exceeded the College Board benchmark in evidence-based reading and writing, and over 75% of the students exceeded the benchmark in math. The College Board benchmarks are the scores that the College Board feels a student needs to earn so that it's a predictor that they would get a C or better in a college level course in that content area. The College Board readiness benchmarks are 480 for evidence-based reading and writing and 530 for math. I also just want to point out that the Connecticut SAT School Day is a viable score if students choose to submit an SAT score to college for admissions. This slide shows the evidence-based reading and writing, math, and total combined scores for all DERG A districts on the 2023 Connecticut SAT School Day. And this slide shows a bit of the fluctuation. Like we talk about a snapshot in time. I want you to please remember that these scores, an SAT score, each section is anywhere from 200 to 800 points. So a fluctuation in 1 to 2 points or 1 to 11 points a year is negligible. And there's constant change over the years, the fluctuation in the scores. We were asked today, late this afternoon, to add a slide about the 6-year average. So this is some longitudinal data. I believe it's a handout that you received. And then shifting gears away from the state mandated tests to the national SAT and ACT, these tests are optional and can be used for college admissions for schools or programs that still require scores. Colleges and universities across the country standardly accept either the SAT or the ACT, which allows our students to choose which format they prefer. And as you can see, many of the members of the class of 2023 took advantage of these tests. So this is where the cohort data shifts. This is the class of 2023, not our current seniors. This slide refers to the national data for the class of 2023 for the SAT. The scores are strong over Connecticut and the national test averages. If a student took a test, they calculate the last test that the student took. Then here's a 3-year comparison, the national SAT scores. We switch to the ACT. The ACT is scored, the score is 1 to 36. It has 4 sections: English, math, reading, and science. And then the composite score is the average of those 4 sections. This is a 3-year comparison for Darien High School, but the national data doesn't come out till later this month. So I left the 2022 data up there so that you can get an idea of the scores. And we score well across Connecticut, and it blows me away how strong the scores are compared to the national averages. So moving to advanced placement, AP exams are College Board exams that are given in May each year. They're designed to assess mastery of content in a specific college level curriculum. The scores are reported on a scale of 1 to 5, with a 3 being considered qualified to receive college credit. Sometimes schools are using the AP scores not for credit, but for placement or for prerequisites. Most of these exams are 2 to 3 hours in length. However, the digital or the AP math classes support a digital portfolio. That's why I would be happy to talk about. Most students prepare for these exams by taking AP courses taught at Darien High School, although we did have a handful of students self-study for classes we don't offer, like AP Chinese, German, and psychology. This is a list of the courses offered in Darien High School, the AP courses offered at Darien High School last year. I'm glad Jackie left because I left AP drawing off of this slide. So we actually have 25 courses at the high school. The AP art program impresses me. I'm not used to having 3 different AP courses that are offered to students. And you do have an expert here who's taking 2 of them. So she could explain the difference, but there are actually 25 with the addition of AP drawing. This is our 5-year comparison, and you can see there's a substantial increase between the number of students that are taking more exams. From 2019 to 2023, it's an increase in 44 students taking more than 250 more exams. And with continued success, I think that's incredibly impressive that 92% of students receive a 3 or higher. I know there was a question about why we're reporting a 3 or higher, but that is the benchmark that the College Board sets for a recommendation for success in college classes, like I mentioned. And I think it's worth noting that the Connecticut State College and University system has a policy in place so that all of their institutions will grant academic credit to any student earning a score of 3 or higher on any AP exam. I was also asked how many students scored a 4 or 5. For 2023, the percentage of students who scored a 4 or 5 on the test is 65%. That's about 485 students on 771 exams. I did bring a handout. That's the summary sheet from College Board about AP tests. And the information is also on our school profile, which is published every year. The school profile is on the website, and that's a document that's an academic summary that goes to all of the colleges with the transcripts. This slide again highlights the increase in participation. To look just in the first square there, under 23, next to the graduating class, that's saying that 75% of the graduating class took at least one AP class before they left high school. And that's compared to a national percentage of about 35%. So we're doing a really great job getting students exposure to college level courses through the AP curriculum at the high school. Our next slide is a new addition for my esteemed colleague, Christina Mauricio, who is the World Language Department Chair, is going to talk to you about the Seal of Biliteracy.
So this is our Seal of Biliteracy report. You will hear from me when I do my board presentation and my curriculum committee presentation later on in the school year, but we just wanted to highlight the achievements of students in the World Language Program, as well as students that are native or heritage speakers of other languages that they learn at home. And they are able to qualify for the Seal of Biliteracy in grades 10, 11, and 12. They, depending on what language they are studying at the high school or what language they are learning at home or independently, they will determine the type of test that they take and what score they need to earn. But to give you an idea, it's around a 3 on an AP exam, an intermediate mid. And to earn the seal, you earn the world language portion in grades 10, 11, or 12, but you don't earn the actual seal until you graduate from high school. And that's something that it's the way the law in Connecticut is written. And, but most of our students earn the seal of literacy in grades 10 and 11, and then they have the opportunity to test again in 12th grade, but we also have classes that just test, classes of 12th graders that test again. And the numbers speak for themselves. We have and these are just seniors, right? So we had how many graduates last year? 300 and something, 340. So yeah, it's a pretty significant amount of the graduating class. The number of languages that they earned the seal in also goes up. The heritage speakers are tested at a different time of the year. We do have some heritage speakers that are studying the language in school. So if you are a heritage speaker of Chinese, you may be taking Chinese in school as well. So, but that it's a very negligible number of students. It's very small, but the number of languages they earn the seal in goes up, and the number of students that earn the seal when they graduate goes up as well. And depending on where they go to college will determine if they can use the actual score report that they get when they take the test for placement or for credit, or just by having the seal on their transcript.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, these are some of the testing dates for this school year. And before we open for discussion, I just wanted to say thank you for your dedication to educational excellence, and also recognize the faculty and staff for all of the time and hard work that it takes to successfully administer these exams, to the parents for all their support, and to the students who continue to make us shine.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you very much. Board questions? Jill.
I have two. My first is I'd like to know the percentage of heritage speakers of the total number of students who received this seal of biliteracy.
There were 8 students last year.
That's in the. So of 154, that in that right column where 8 says languages, that means heritage speakers.
So those were students that were, for example, studying, I'll give you an example of a student studying Spanish at DHS and also studying Japanese at home and learning Japanese at home. So that student is a heritage speaker on all the way on the right, but is a world language student in the middle.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. My second question is looking at the, thank you for this AP chart. Looking at the range of scores, understanding that we want, looking at with two minds, understanding that we want kids to have, students to have as much challenge as they can, and we want our students who can do college level courses to absolutely do college level courses and to score well when they take APs. We also at the same time want a wide range of students to take AP courses, which is your 75% number you were talking about. When you look at that range of scores from 1 to 5, we have just under 100 who are getting a 1 or about a 1 or a 2. Can you talk about how you look at those numbers? Do we have a percentage of those? Do you break it down, or is a percentage of kids where we just, students where we just wanted them to have the experience? Not that, you know, again, I want to weigh that we want everybody to do well, but we also sometimes just want kids to do.
This is my first year here, and I'm thinking that Francis might have a better answer to this. We were talking before about the introduction to a waiver, where instead of requiring a teacher to make a recommendation for a student to be in an AP course, that DHS has opened that opportunity to students and parents who feel that they could be successful at that level. So I'm assuming that some of the lower scores might be students who wanted to take on that challenge, but were not necessarily recommended. Get more questions.
Anything to add, Francis? Sure, please. Thank you.
So I think that you're seeing some of the impact of the waiver on the numbers and the greater level of access to all of our APs represented there. You'll note that the overall performance level doesn't go down with the introduction of the kids who didn't necessarily qualify for those AP courses outright. But then I would just say that as someone who has attended AP institutes, and I can't represent all teachers who have done this training before. And although our teachers really take great pride in students earning a 4 or a 5, and they really don't feel comfortable with kids who don't necessarily get those scores, even though 3 is enough to warrant celebration, really, because that is something that counts in the state. Kind of a philosophy about it is that if you don't get a number of, say, 2s, then you are not letting enough kids access that class. So I know for the English APs, it's something that we do look at because we want to make sure we're not trying to have kids score 2s necessarily, but if everyone scored above a 3, I think that we're probably not promoting that class and challenging enough of our kids. So I think that that is something to keep in mind when we look at those scores.
Thank you.
Great. Julie.
Thank you. I'll just add as a quick follow-up. Do we ever look at the correlation between how those students might have performed in their class grades versus how they performed on the test? Like, you get graded in the class, in the AP class, right? And so if somebody doesn't score as well on the test, perhaps they did quite well on the coursework and had a bad test day or are not great test takers or something along those lines. I'm just wondering if there's any learning to be had from that angle as well.
So glad. Thank you for supporting. What I can say is in an AP class, typically a lot of their assessments that they're getting graded on throughout the year is AP content. So it should be a direct correlation.
It's a bit different for both of the AP English exams because they're mostly skill driven and they're not content heavy, right? But we see it all the time. It is true that some of the kids aren't necessarily great test takers, and I guess it would be interesting to do a correlation between the two. But like I said, our midterm and our all of our assessments are designed to promote, they're aligned with the different components of the exams. So typically, once they've gone through all those assessments, they're very prepared. So, it's something that we could look at, but just like it's like with anything else, there are kids who take tests better than others.
Thank you. Dennis?
So I realize we don't have a lot of data, so I may make a huge leap in my statement or assumption, but if I look through the SAT scores over the last 6 years, I begin to see a decline generally from 17, 18 to 22, 23. And then if I look at the AP scores, I see maybe an increase or at least relative stability. So my question is, seems like our students who perform well, COVID did not affect as much, but those who are lesser students or not enough to take an AP class seem to have suffered dramatically in COVID. Now, again, I'm reading just 2 data points, but how are we going to, am I A, correct, and B, how are we addressing that?
I can respond to that, I guess, in one way. I want to circle back to Sarah's comments about being really careful to look at any given assessment and consider a student's potential for learning and performance. But another way, I think it's a very astute observation you've made. And one of the things that we need to look at is not just achievement levels, but growth over time for students. And that's something that we will continue to look at as an administration, because that's another way to look at the data. Not just our students hitting the target, who's scoring at a given level, whether it's SBA or NGSS or AP or SAT, all of the letters, but how are students making growth over time? And are there trends that we can observe for different groups of students? And then how do we, again, target instruction to support that?
Yeah.
Mr. Maroney, just,
Nope.
sorry.
Sorry, go ahead,
Just to
Kathy.
clarify your question, so we can look into it and get back to you. Your hypothesis is that the SAT data is going down and our AP scores and enrollment are going up. And you're curious as to why?
Well, again, it's two totally different data points, and I understand that, but the way I would look at it is the students who are capable of taking AP classes are carrying, not carrying, but I'm assuming they're going to score high on the SAT as well, and those students who are not taking APs are struggling, which is driving the scores down. It's a huge assumption, I understand, but to
We
me,
can look into
I only
that.
have two data points to look at.
I just want to make sure I understand.
Dave?
Thank you. Dr. Fettigan, just following up to Dennis's point on data generally. So when we look at the ACT, we look at the it's blanked over SBAC and what is the SAT? Thank you. You now know how well I did on my SAT. Locked it up. When we look at that and we look at what happens in terms of grading within a class, an actual grade, how do we think about the interplay there? Are we able to control for, say, grade inflation, or is there an interrelation between those two? Or am I thinking there's a metric there that isn't?
Well, I think that is something that we can look at. I know that that was discussed in last year's board presentation, which I did watch several times, trying to think about, what would be some of the questions that would be of interest to the board in preparing for tonight's presentation. That's a question I think that is a really hard question to answer because there are so many different factors at play. I think another question we could ask is, along the way to the summative assessment, for example, AP or SAT, what is the data showing us that we can make a prediction of how our students might perform, right? We don't want to be ever teaching to a test, but we should not have so many surprises about, right, how a student's performed over time in a course, because the assessments that are leading up to the summative assessment should be assessing the same types of skills. So, right, we would expect that students are demonstrating mastery and progress with those skills over time. It would show up on the summative assessment, like throughout the course.
Right. And I think there was a point made earlier that perhaps the test bank has increased over the years as this tests have gone on, and that may be changing. So I guess to follow up on that, I don't know how substantively you judge that, if it is the size of the test bank that's changing it, or the difficulty of the questions and how you would kind of find a level for that versus what you would look at in grading and potential inflation there, versus the performance, which seems to not be on the trend we'd all like to be seeing.
And how are we asking questions on assessments? So we don't want to be teaching to a test, but making sure that we are framing questions with language that so children are familiar with language. I'm thinking even at in grades 3 through 8, sometimes, for example, we could be talking about main idea, and in the SBA, it might be framed central theme, right? So that might be confusing to a child. So how to go back to the point about vocabulary before, there's even some element of test taking vocabulary. And I think we need time to take a look at that. So it's not just grade inflation, but maybe how are we designing assessments to give students that kind of familiarity and exposure throughout a course and a program of study.
Right. And I guess the fear when I say grade inflation, we have everyone at DHS as a 4.0, but yet we're seeing our scores go down. That would tell me something's wrong. I don't actually know what the GPA is cumulative across, but that's just a thought.
And that's the thing about data, right? Data should, it's almost counterintuitive, but data should cause us to ask more questions. It should, give us more questions than conclusions. And these questions that the board is asking tonight will certainly inform, will continue to inform how we look at data as a curriculum committee and as a curriculum leadership team, and what we come back with as far as future updates.
No, and I know some of these data sets are quite limited, so it's nice to know that you guys actually do have the tools behind the scene to drill down and actually do some more analysis.
Thanks, Steve. Dennis?
I was just curious if you had any idea about the AP scores, about what percentage of the tests were taken by grade level. I know that we have,
I think that was one of the slides, the participation slide, didn't it break it down by, there you go, by grade? Oh, sorry. That's okay. Well, I just highlighted the graduating class on that slide. That's why I think I didn't draw attention to the fact that
And as, I would just say, as it was discussed last year, students, of course, have more opportunity in 11th and 12th grade to experience AP assessments because so much of their experience in 9th grade is a little bit more prescribed, right? They have a little bit more flexibility as they move up through the grades.
Sorry, Duke, I'm still trying to formulate my question. So I'm a little, I don't know how to ask this question. I don't even know who to address it. I think it's Dr. Adley possibly, but I think when we had our meeting in the high school auditorium, I think it was 2 years ago, we had students come in and saying how Darien is putting too much pressure on them, where there's too many AP exams. And yet when I look through the trends from 2021, we had 959 students take exams and now we're up to 1,201. So we've had 250 more kids take the exam. So how do I pencil what was said 2 years ago and what is happening today?
So that's a great question in terms of, I appreciate all the questions being asked tonight. That's the bottom line, is because that is what the data actually presents. So it gives you the opportunity to delve a little bit more. But a part of it a little bit goes back to what Francis said in terms of we do have an open door, relatively speaking, for students who want to take AP courses. The high school administration, the high school counselors work closely with families in terms of trying to counsel them as to what might be the best course or otherwise. But occasionally, and maybe not occasionally, and a lot of times, there are a lot of students who want to step up, or a lot of families who want to step up and take the challenge. I don't think all challenges are bad. If we force them to take it, I think that's not a good decision. But I would like some students. Honestly, I'd like some students to step up, try. And that may come awful as a superintendent. Well, maybe they don't just make it, but there's a learning in there. And not everything here that is a 1 or 2 is like a failure, right? And I'm very pleased about the tenor of our discussion tonight, because I don't want any concept to go out here of, because our schools are doing well. But there are patterns, even 3 through 8. I'll take a pattern for 3 through 8, even in SBAC. If you put all the kids together, 3 through 8, over the last couple of years, they've increased. You might not see that through the raw score here. Now you'll say 3 years, Alan, but what about the 5 years? Well, when you look at the 3 years across all the rest of the districts and how everybody done after the pandemic, it's all sort of settled down at a different level, so to speak, for the most part. Our kids who are doing an AP and SAT, I would say I would be celebrating these scores. Your high school come off as, it said number 4 in the state. Actually, that's compared to two schools who've got like 200 kids in them, right? The top 2 of the schools in the top 4 had 200 kids in them. So you're really 1 and 2 in the state. So certainly we take the SBAC and these other scores as we go along as being important. It's the end product too that we're also want to make sure that we're sustaining, and I believe we are. But that, I don't necessarily see that as in of itself as one statistic as being bad in itself, unless you peel back the onion a little bit and there's more to it than that I'm actually commenting on.
And if I could just add one other comment, and I think this is something that's important for educators and parents alike to think about. While we want children and we want to open the doorway and access to AP courses, there are other courses that also don't provide an opportunity for students to earn AP credit, but are also very important. And I know I've only been here a short amount of time, but I think we want to be careful about messaging to students that they should also pursue courses that are of high interest to them. Sometimes, and I'm a parent of high school students myself, right? Kids are very driven to achieve, and we want them to achieve at very high levels. And these exams are important, these courses are very important, but also part of being a high school student is having the opportunity to take other courses of interest. And students have only a finite number of periods in the school day to fit their courses in. And I would imagine I would think in Darien, there are conversations with parents and children about what goes on during that school day. These conversations happen in my home. And when you have a finite number of periods and you're selecting and you're thinking about college and career admission, college admissions, university admissions, career down the line, it's also important for students to take other courses that just might be of interest. I think that's an important message for us to have as educators and parents. So for example, culinary, photography. I was recently in a tech ed course where students were learning how to take care of their own vehicles. These are also important life skills, lessons, and experiences for our students to have. For what that's worth.
That's
a little
great.
bit of my
No,
mom voice, too.
Thank you. Julie.
Thank you. To kind of build on what Dr. Fettigan was saying too, a reminder that we did approve a few courses in the last year or so to make it possible for students to continue their course of study, for example, in Spanish, without having to take an AP class, for students who want to continue studying a certain subject but aren't necessarily looking to add that additional rigor to whatever their course load is. They don't have to give up Spanish. And I think we've done it in other areas. It's just the Spanish sticks out in my head. And I think that's important, and that we message to students to look at all the options available to them so they can put together the right amount of rigor and challenge, and also meet their interests.
And I would just add, Mrs. Best, that being aware of college admissions processes right now. I know, and Mrs. Ostar, I'm sure, could reinforce this. Colleges and universities are also looking for students who've had a wide breadth of experiences in their program of study in school. And I think that's an important consideration too.
The college admissions conversation is a big one, and it's obviously for another night, but it's hard to be a student now and to choose not to get caught up in the competition. So I think, when we look at the course offerings at the high school, 3 AP art classes, a couple computer science classes, the world language classes, AP music theory. There are AP courses that are not in the traditional 4 core academics. So students can pursue a passion or an area of interest and take an AP class.
Brenda, did you have a question?
I just wanted to call back to a question that Mr. Maroney had raised, and I hope that we can come to maybe a greater plane of understanding on this. But I do think that students aren't necessarily. I feel that I speak for many when I say that we as students are greatly pressured by society, our community, our teachers, our families, our friends, social media, every account that's saying, follow me, I'll get you into Harvard, all these different societal structures are in place to push us on this rigorous path. And we choose to go down that path. Yes, we choose to push ourselves. We choose to, engage with the abundant resources that are made available to us in this district and the abundant privilege that's made available to us in this district. But, it's not easy, and it's not anything, anything that isn't, mentally taxing at a point and isn't, it takes a toll on you. That's all I have to say. And I know that I speak for many when I say this, and it takes a lot to come and say, I'm struggling here in this AP course, and it's just easier, to go with the flow and take, my mom always says, take AP lunch. That's just what our culture has evolved into. So I really think to understand, why students are, saying we feel stressed and we feel pressured, and we're looking the path, we're examining the path that they're going down. We also need to put it in context with, what our society is today.
Thank you, Brenna.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenna. Well said. Thank you. Jill.
Just one last comment. Again, I know it's a point in time, a lot of this data. But I just want to reiterate how much this board is from a point of caring, and that I know is shared with staff and administration, concerned about the impact of COVID. So just wanting to continue understanding that we're coming to you because we want to know that our students have what they need to remediate potential gaps. So I just wanted to I know we're doing what we can. I know we're looking at things, but I just wanted to keep saying that because I think it's important. Thank you.
Dennis.
Yep, so Mrs. Best brings up a very good point, I think, on the number of AP classes offered. And I think what's hard to, again, pencil with is that maybe 3 years ago, we only had 17 classes and we've approved multiple classes over time. So of course, then you're going to have more kids taking the AP classes. So I think I'm not asking for more work now, but I think in the future, it would be beneficial to compare apples to apples and see how many AP classes we had in X year prior and how many we have today and how many students, just to, because it's hard to just look at the total aggregate and come up with answers to the data. I think it can be very misleading.
I was from listening to what Brenda just said, just seeing the increase of what's it, 300 some odd AP tests being taken. That makes me a little uncomfortable, right? Honestly, like I just want to make sure that our kids are doing this for the right reasons and not because they feel like they need to be successful.
But I also want to balance it with, we do explicitly want kids who we wouldn't traditionally have thought could take APs.
I hear you. I just want to
So I
make sure
just-
that the
I just want to
pressure-
make sure that
But
that's
it's a
on the table
balancing
too.
act. It is an absolute balancing act. And we just heard that there's a lot of pressure on these kids and we have to be conscious of that fact.
I'm not sure limiting the number of AP classes that they could offer would make them feel better. I don't think that would take away their stress. So I think that, coming here from another district and seeing the focus on mental health and wellness and working with Alicia and the wellness center that was put together at the high school and trying to send the message out to students that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say I'm struggling in this AP class and to try and create more of a judgment-free zone than to say, no, you can't take 4 APs. I think that would cause a lot of stress too.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the data and the work. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the board for the discussion. Thank you very much.
Take care. Thank you. We will move on to discussion and possible action on proposed Middlesex and Darien High School field trips. In the interest of time, I know Principal Dunn and Principal Dahlstrom are here. I will move to the Middlesex Middle School field trip requests. These are all, as I look through them, pretty standard year to year. Look at the middle school ones, which are Quiz Bowl. Are there any board questions, anything specific to these? No.
And Dr. Wright, is there anything different from year over year that maybe?
Thank you. Good. And then Principal Dunn, I think here, Model UN, National TSA Association Conference, Quiz Bowl and DECA. Anything new or different here, Principal Dunn?
No, nothing new, just a thank you to all of you for supporting it and to our teachers for taking their weekends to go to these wonderful competitions with their students.
Agreed and well said, Principal Dunn and Principal Dahlstrom. Thank you very much to all those that take time out of their family and their lives to continue to support our kids and our students and all these programs that involve travel and being away from home. So thank you. Any board questions or comments on any of these proposed trips? May I have a motion to approve the proposed Middlesex and Darien High School field trips as proposed. Joe McCammon, second by Dave Brown. All those in favor? That is unanimous with everyone here. Thank you both for being here and staying. Tried to move it along a little bit for you. Well, you really should stay till Brenna and Swaha leave also, right? It's a school night, right? Good. All right, thank you. We will move on to discussion and possible acceptance of contemplated gifts for the athletic department. I see Mr. Manfredonia on the phone. I see him on Zoom.
Mr.
so-
Chairman?
Yeah.
And Chris is here to present what was in the packet. We did receive one other one from the Darien Junior Field Hockey. I have not signed that one. I am approving it and Chris is approving it. With your permission, I'd like to enter that with the rest of them. It's
great.
Pretty par for the course.
Okay, good. So we've got, again, Blue Wave Booster Club here. A gift, 3,000 to 4,000. We've got Blue Wave Booster Club 3,000 and 4,000. Backpacks for boys, swim and dive team. Backpack for girls swim team. We've got Blue Wave Booster Club iPad for something use and 26 equipment bags for girls hockey. And then the Darien Junior Field Hockey would like to support the Darien High School Blue Wave Field Hockey, donating to cash to cover expenses associated with team filming throughout the season. Team filming from Max Theater Hockey Tournament and photographer. So, Mr. Manfredoni, anything you want to add to these?
No, just, we're fortunate to have a community of individuals and organizations that are willing to give these nice to have to our athletic programs. And I, thank the board for considering these and thank these community members for donating these items to our athletic teams and our students.
Thank you, Mr. Manfredoni. Any board questions with these? I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in total. Yes.
So to me, this, just looking at this field hockey one that I'm seeing for the first time in completion, I don't see any receipts for this. There's no total. Can we get more details on this? I feel like I'm approving something that I don't know details about.
Yeah, so it's it would be a total donation of a $5,000 check to the field hockey program for the use of Huddle Film, Max Tournament, which is that overnight trip that the board approved in June that they just recently went to get film from that for recruiting purposes, as well as action shots for photographers, for end of year celebratory video.
It's $5,000 for various forms of film and photography. Is that correct?
Correct.
Any other board questions or comments?
Are we talking about the football one now also? Is that one of the
I'm just
five?
talking about all of them.
Okay, I had a question on football if I could. I'm just curious, Chris, if any of the gifts, very generous, by the way, all these are incredibly generous and we're so lucky to have all the support. But specific to football, are any of these items usable and available to other programs, weights, things in the weight room, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a good point. So the football donation would be available to any program, PE class, specifically for the weight room. So the answer is yes, they would be.
Yeah, sure. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
thank you. And then just in general, is there any sort of tracking on which teams get gifts when? For example, I feel like one of the teams on the list here got coats last year and now they're getting something in addition, which I'm sure they will thoroughly enjoy. And it's something that'll stay with the program and I'm sure it'll be very well used. But I loved seeing cheer on here. I don't know if we've seen cheer in my tenure, a gift to the cheer squad. So I'm just curious if we keep kind of an eye on, are things getting spread around a little bit?
Yeah, so the requests have to go through a couple of different processes. First, the booster club, then the athletic department and in conjunction with the superintendent. So there is certainly a close eye kept on, what's going to which schools and which programs.
Dennis.
I have a similar question, to Julie, on, I got a twofold question. One is the gift of the iPad. We don't have any unused iPads from before when we had bring your own device. And secondly, can this iPad also be used for other programs as well? Or is it just for I think it's girls field hockey? No.
It's girls ice hockey.
Ice hockey, sorry.
So to my knowledge, there aren't iPads. I'd have to double check on that. It could be used for other, seasonal teams in the fall and or the spring, when the hockey team wasn't using it in the winter.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Good. You all good with these, Alan?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Any other board questions or comments? May I have a motion to accept the contemplated gifts for the athletic department as presented. Dave Brown, second by Dennis. All those in favor? That is unanimous with everyone here. I think to your point, Chris, and to some of the board members here, thank you for the ongoing incredible generosity from these booster clubs and from individual families. It's a nice way to continue to support all these programs. So thank you very much on behalf of the board and the administration, and thank you for spearheading these. Mr. Manfredonia, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care. We will move on to discussion and possible acceptance of the contemplated gift from the Darien Foundation for the robotics program. Mr. Timothy McGuire or Dr. Adley. Mr. McGuire, how are you?
Well, give him a wee bit of FaceTime anyway. He's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Tim McGuire, your recently hired instructional technology coordinator.
Could you just get closer to that mic so we can hear you?
Certainly.
Thank
There
you
we
so
go.
much.
So I'm Tim McGuire, your recently hired instructional technology coordinator. This is my 4th week here. I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Deneen, and mostly I'm here just to try to put a face to the name because I haven't had a chance to meet most of you yet. So thank you so much for your support. And yeah, I'm looking forward to deploying this little extra bit of funds for some of the robotics initiatives we have going on.
Great.
Got it.
Thank you very much. So this again is from our friends and very generous donors at the Darien Foundation for $41,200. This will help with ongoing competition fees and transportation to competition and advisor training for robots K through 12. Anything you want to add here, Dr. Adley?
No, I recognize the foundation, Darien Foundation has supported, graciously supported this program over the last couple of years, and I'm grateful that they are continuing to support it just in terms of supporting the fundraising to get it up and running, so we can get the process up and running. So I'm just very grateful for their continued generosity.
Great. Board questions? Great. I think this continues to fund and help the program like we discussed last year. So a motion to accept the contemplated gift from the Darien Foundation for the robotics program. Oh, Robin, sure. Thank you.
She's motioning.
You're motioning. Well, thank you, Robin. Thank you. I wanted to make sure you didn't have any questions. Thank you for motioning, Robin. Second. Katie, all those in favor? That is unanimous. And a big shout out again to our friends at the Darien Foundation. Thank you for your ongoing generosity. I know the robotics program has been incredibly successful. I've seen some of the stuff that's gone on in the program. I've seen some of the professional development. I've seen some of what's been built, and kind of the energy and the enthusiasm around it are incredible. So, and Tim, thanks for joining us and the hard work that you're doing. Welcome. Great. We will move on to further discussion and possible action on proposed revisions to board policies 4400 social media, 6210 program of instruction, curriculum, textbooks, and other instructional materials, and 6220 challenges to instructional materials. The one thing that is missing here this evening is the policy specific to advertising. We've had ongoing conversations around the policy to advertising. We have that on the agenda for the next meeting on October 24th. The board has asked a lot of good questions around that, and I think the board will continue the conversation and looking at a potential pilot of an advertising program up at the high school and the scoreboard, but we'll continue that dialogue at the next meeting. Rich and the administration have put together some data from other districts. So I think it's a good opportunity to look at doing something locally, monitoring it, and continue to build our questions and our policies around that. So that's the one reason why that's not here, but will be for further conversation at the next board meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Brown and Ms. Sion.
Thank you for that, Duke.
Sure.
We have 3 items on for today. They're in the board packet, which everyone's had since last week. 2 are not having a change. 1 is a minor change, the language reflecting conversations that went on. I'll turn it over to Marge. I haven't heard any feedback from anybody. I don't know if you have, or if you wanted to speak to anything in here.
No, just the feedback that I mentioned from the teachers union about what their preference would be. You know, to have an ad hoc committee that gets appointed each time.
Right, which we have noted in here already. So nothing further.
else.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Good.
Okay. So we'll go one by one here. I guess policy 4400 social media. Any additional board questions or thoughts? Jill.
Not on this. I just want to make sure that communication is picking up the fact that this was just internal social media. And so we need some parameters for an external social media policy, and that hopefully that can show up on a communications agenda in the near future. Okay. Thank you.
Next, policy 6210, program of instruction, curriculum, textbooks, and other instructional materials. Any additional questions or comments there? And policy 6220, challenges to instructional materials. We just received feedback, we just touched base on this, that suggested it might be more effective if teachers were chosen each time a challenge was submitted. So the teachers would be selected for the committee based on subject matter and grade level expertise. Pending discussion at this meeting, the language remains unchanged. Any additional conversation around that? Jill?
I wanted to talk about the parent piece. So Marge, I see you noted parents who collectively must have children enrolled in Darien High School, Middlesex Middle School, and at least one of the board's elementary schools. Can you explain sort of what that means? And then I was curious to know if administration had any thoughts on sort of what a process is that would be behind that.
Right, well, that was Jessica Richmond Smith's language, that we get parents who have children at all levels. I respectfully disagree with that. But I left it in because that's what she recommended. And so, you know, there's nothing written in stone. You could change it, you could, you know, not change it. I don't know that a parent with a second grader wants to be on a committee where they're challenging the book at the high school.
Right.
But if they did, they could certainly apply.
So are we looking at, is administration recommending I see that you want teachers to be more fluid depending on the material, which makes sense. Are you looking for a set of parents? Are you looking for the parent selection process also to be more fluid in parallel with the teacher selection process?
So I'll give our suggestion or a variation of this, if you don't mind. It's called the Superintendent's Review Committee, so to speak. So I'm just going to respectfully, I know the board picked up on this last time, so since it's on the table still for discussion, I would encourage the board to stay out of it personally and not be selective of the people. I wanted the PTO to select them. They don't want to do that. That's okay. I'm happy, honestly, to open it up if there's I would have the same process as the staff, that we would rotate. I would have people to apply, and that would be randomly selected. And you're just going to have to trust me that as a superintendent, I will randomly select someone. And each time we do it, we would get a new group of people in. That's my suggestion for you. So we don't get into a whole, I would open it up for anybody who wants to, let's say it's a middle school text or something. If the community members, parents wanted to participate, I would let them put their name in, and then there can be a random selection of a name. That's what I would suggest. But if the board wants to continue the ownership of it, then okay.
So Alan, if I look at section D here, no more than 3 teachers, would those teachers rotate each time also?
They want that,
So
yes.
you'd have a standing committee of A, B, and C. And then D, the 3 teachers, and E, the 3 parents. You'd kind of have an all call if there was a challenge and a meeting needed.
That's just my suggestion.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that. So Dennis.
So I like the random thought, but then do we then need to revise the high school, middle school, and elementary school, or would you then separate into 3 buckets your randomness? One from each, right? I mean,
Which one are we on, Dennis? Sorry, just repeat.
E, so E, if you're going to pick random, are you just going to choose 3 people at random regardless of where their students reside? Or are we going to still abide by the 1 high school, 1 middle school, 1 elementary school? At least 1.
If does this say at least 1 here? I don't think so.
No, it's just.
At least one of the elementary school collective.
But you have to have each school, each
level
level covered.
I'm happy to still stick with that if you want to. I don't think it's necessary personally.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to read through this. So Dave.
Now that Dennis is reading it this way, I'm seeing the word collectively. And
Yes.
I think that means you need a kid in one of these 3 schools.
Correct.
But I think there's a thought that maybe you need 1 in each of these.
One parent representing each level, I think is what we're trying to
That's
say.
also an I.
I'm seeing it as
Right.
each level,
Yeah.
like there needs to be a parent of a high school, middle school, or you don't need to have 1 student in each level, but you need collectively, each of the parents has to have a child in each of those schools. But if you're doing random, I'm not sure that needs to apply.
Well, I mean.
So time out. Thank you, Dennis. So the conversation at the table now is, are you randomly selecting 3 people? Or do you want a representative from the high school, from the middle school, and a representative from the elementary schools? That's how I understand it. So we'll go to you next, Julie.
Thank you. I'm kind of going back a step here. It's my understanding, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, Marge, this is written describing a committee that's going to be a seated committee that's going to exist for a period of time.
Just for each individual challenge. That was.
Okay, so an individual challenge, we're calling together 3 parents who collectively, now, as I understand it, it's the 3 collectively represent the 3 levels of school. So like maybe I have a high school and middle, someone else has some elementary kids, but across the board, we've covered all of the schools. Okay.
That's the intent.
Okay, so I do think that that's an important piece, though, that we didn't necessarily nail down in our last discussion. Are we setting up a committee that will be standing? And it sounds like, Dr. Adley, you're recommending no, that it's a committee that's called together on a per case basis.
So what I thought I said, you bring up, I think to clarify it to your point is there is kind of a standing committee of A, B, and C that's pretty consistent. And then if and when there's a challenge, you bring in D and E, which are the 3 teachers and the 3 parents. That's my understanding of it. I think we still have to determine whether those parents, those 3 represent each of the levels in the school. So we'll pause there for a minute and go to Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Duke. So
Sure.
now reflecting again on collectively, and to Dennis's question, I guess we would have to have 3 buckets. You'd have to have parents in each of those buckets, and then you take a draw out of bucket A, bucket B, bucket C in order to do this. Okay.
Yeah, to my comment earlier, you almost have like a roll call or an all call, and you would get submissions from across the elementary schools, you'd get submissions from the middle school, and you'd get submissions from the high school. And then you would randomly choose those 3 people.
And then D and E are ad hoc. Right?
Yes, good way to look at it, Dave. Sarah?
So I think having the 3 levels is important. And I would like to go back to number 1 that says parent of a current student. First of all, there's a typo in current. Second of all,
Where are you?
number
saying
1,
number-
the very top, line 2 of the procedure. Should the complainant be required to be a parent of the school where the instructional material is being challenged?
No.
Is a parent of a kindergartner challenging something used in the high school? Does that parent have enough knowledge to know what is developmentally appropriate or whatever for a high school? I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm just throwing it out there.
I respectfully don't know if a parent of a high school has a developmental knowledge to know, like.
No, these are questions that people have asked me. so
I'm okay with if parents are being on the committee, and I've advocated that they would be on the committee, that they could represent. Yes.
Okay.
I don't want to make processes that are so complex to be
No, I
honest with
agree.
you, to implement.
You're asking about the challenger, right? The person who's
challenger,
bringing
yes.
forth the
Challenge.
challenge. Do they
Yes.
No,
need
it
to have a
plays
student?
into kind of a lot of the complaints about a specific book at the high school. If you looked at those complaints, none of those parents had actually anyone in the high school.
That's my point. Like,
So
shouldn't,
then, if that's gonna be the case, we need to lay out what their chain of communication is, because these folks don't have a classroom teacher to approach and a building principal with whom they have a relationship to follow through the process in order to, if necessary, arrive at the final challenge piece that we're talking about tonight. To me, I don't completely understand what the grounds are for challenging something that your people have no exposure to. Your people meaning your family, your student.
Or you
your-
could just be reacting to the social media that's out there.
Well, we get a lot of that. I understand
Right.
that, but it's a lot of people who are complaining about things that are not in any proximity to their children. So
Right.
I'm unclear on how that makes sense.
So I'll flip back to administration, or Marge, I don't know how much experience you have at Westport, but I mean, did you get into the weeds there specific to a first grade parent challenging a book that they heard about or knew about that's up at the high school?
So I never experienced that. It was always the level where but this was the policy. It gave anyone the right to do it, but I never experienced that.
Okay. Katie.
think this is getting very problematic. The teachers saying that they would like to be able to convene on a case-by-case basis so that they can have the most relevant teachers there. Why wouldn't we do the same thing with parents? I'm not for parents being on the committee, I'll make that clear again, but why would you be putting kindergarten parents on a book challenging something that is potentially at a high school level? That doesn't make any sense. Why would we hold our teachers to one standard and not our others? Just like having a kindergarten parent being able to challenge something at the high school, that's just pushing out your own beliefs on other people. Like that's not at all, that has nothing, this is getting problematic and I think we need to button it down.
Thank you, Katie. Jill?
I think that limiting it to a parent of a current student is an appropriate standard. I think it just starts to get limiting. I think, you know, if somebody found a religious tract entered into a library in a different school, I think they should have the right to challenge it as an example. You know, I hope that would not happen given our own internal policies, but I think you have to put a limit somewhere. I think there is a chain of command. If you find it in a library, you can go to the librarian. I think it starts to get complicated. And it's easy enough just to say it's a parent of a current student or an employee.
So how do you, before you can, to come to this point, last time we were told that a parent had to show that they had gone through all the steps. So how is that even possible? If there's a parent at one of the elementary schools, how do they even show that they've gone through the steps of speaking to the high school people when they have no reason for that? They don't have a classroom teacher. They don't have that chain of communication to follow because they're not part of that community.
So they'd probably end up speaking directly, if there was no other educator in the middle, like a librarian or somebody else, they'd end up speaking to the principal. You may, I understand your concern too. I'm trying to make a system that's not overbearing either, simple to implement.
I would like to add, sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I would like to add in the appendix some sort of, what steps have you taken to get to this point? Have you spoken to person A? Have you spoken to person B? Just so we know that they've done their due diligence before filing this complaint.
I think that's a fair enough ask as to what, I don't know if you want to call it a chain of command. I mean, if it's a chain of command, if we stick specifically to parents associated with kids in a particular school, to the point of this conversation, to me, their chain of command, they go to an elementary school principal, that principal's probably going to direct them to superintendent or Dr. Fedigan or someone. Dave.
Yeah, I just had 2 points. One's a follow-up. I think the idea of documenting what steps you've taken, I think that's reasonable with the understanding from the administration that yes, if you don't actually have a student in the classroom, that you probably would start at the higher level, the principal of the building. That makes perfect sense. So with that understanding in mind, I'd be fine for that ad. The other question is whether we leave the language of the superintendent or the board. There was a suggestion earlier. I don't think we've addressed where that should be. I would personally vote that it remain with the board, but I don't think we've resolved that issue.
Where are you mean for the parents?
C.
Back to E.
Oh.
Sorry.
Back to E, we have the strikeout of superintendent to the board. Dr. Adley suggested to be superintendent in doing the random draw. I would suggest actually we stay with it as drafted as the board.
Julie.
Going back again to this idea of whether or not a parent who does not have a student in the school should be bringing forth a challenge. I just want to point out once again that we're talking about things that are in the gray areas. If there were a glaringly inappropriate item found in a library or classroom and it were brought to a building administrator's attention or whomever, I have great faith that could be remedied quickly and would not end up in this process. So Jill, to your example, I feel like there are measures for that to be taken care of that don't come to the point of convening this group of 9 people to go through this process. So I'm pushing again that I think challenges people who have students in the schools where the materials exist. And then I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents that I would support
while I don't think parents belong on the committee, I would support Dr. Adley being the person to choose those parents if we are going to go that route.
Yeah, I kind of, as you think through this and listen to everyone's good thoughts here, I think in order to make this effective, I think the book challenge should be specific, coming from a person whose children have seen it or experiencing it, or it's in that particular school. I think if a parent comes across it as not in that school, they have a methodology to ask what they've heard about potentially that's at a high school or middle school, and kind of ask to get educated on it. I'm not sure it comes up the route of a book challenge, since they're not directly involved in it. They may need to be educated as to why it's up there, or that it's a reference material versus curriculum. But I think they have a method to ask and learn versus someone whose student is in the particular school that the book is in. And then the only other thing I go back and forth on is the board versus the superintendent. I'm just not so sure. Happy to have a conversation, Dave, but I don't know how the board randomly picks parents. I mean, I guess that's what I struggle with versus the superintendent.
Follow-up question on that?
Yeah,
please?
sure.
There was some talk at our last meeting about looking for parents that have experience or expertise in relevant areas, whether it's education or child development. Is that what we're looking
Honestly,
for?
honestly, Julie, everybody has expertise in this area to some degree.
Well, if they're all parents, they all have parenting expertise,
Yeah.
is what I'm thinking.
I just don't want to get into that level. I'll just be perfectly honest with you. I don't want to get into that level of decision making that here's a resume of all the things I've done versus your resume versus, honestly, I'm not going to win that, and it's not going to be fruitful. That's why I say, let's do it like a blind lottery for.
I agree with that.
So
Katie.
thank you. Point of clarification. Dr. Fedigan or Dr. Adley, can you just come back to the very beginning of this and clarify what is meant by instructional material? Is this like curriculum material that is part of what is actually going to be tested? Does this exclude library books?
Oh, no. No, this is
Anything is an instructional material, anything in the school,
resources being used, or a book or otherwise.
including pleasure reading in the library.
Yes.
Dennis, and then we'll see if we can
I just-
summarize this. Go ahead,
I'm
Dr.
sorry, I just
Adley.
want to remind the board that just what the chairman just said. A lot of the complaints that we have had that have got a lot of attention are from people who don't have kids in that school that they're complaining about. So I'm just pointing it out, like, because
Well, they're reacting to social media and incorrect and out of context headlines that are put out there to stir the controversy and stir the pot.
And we have no
And
idea.
they're-
if they've read it.
Tens and 20 and 25 cut and paste emails that say the same thing.
yeah, but I'm just
So-
making the point that for those people, individuals, I would turn around and say, I'm sorry, you don't have a child in the high school, respectfully. right?
But-
Which is fine
but-
if that's what we're doing.
But to the point of the earlier conversation, there's nothing wrong with guiding those folks and educating them on what, if they've heard about some reference material or book, we can guide them as to the purpose that it's there as a reference resource or just as part of a public library, public school system.
And
Okay.
also, we could also make clear, sorry to jump in, that their students have neither access nor exposure to these materials within our school system at this time. And so if there's other recourse they want to explore regarding those particular publications, that's entirely within their rights, but.
So I think the one thing we have to look at, or knowing this group here with all the great questions we have, this could continue for quite a while, and happy to roll it to the next meeting. But I think we need to see if we want to make a decision on this. I think we're okay with number one, that they must be a parent of a current student. Are we in agreement there? And then I think we're good with, and Katie, thank you for clarifying what materials. I think we're good with the committee will consist of A, B, and C. I think we're good with D, 3 teachers representing level and department specialization. Does that make sense? I would propose that the 3 parents are associated with the specific. My thought is that the parents chosen by the superintendent are specific to the school where the reference or curriculum material is and where the challenge is being presented. That's where I would land. And again, I think the one thing we have to think about is we can go through this process. Maybe something is challenged, maybe something isn't. It isn't necessarily set in stone. If we need to go back and review how the process worked, I would hope that if a challenge came through and we went through the process, we would have to do, a review of how that process worked and that we were all comfortable with how that process worked. And if there's anything we needed to change, I'll pause there and go over to Robin.
I agree with what you're saying. I agree. It needs to be the school level that the challenge is coming from. And that I would submit that the person who's making the challenge should have a student at that school where the book resides or the material. What I was going to say in addition to that though, is that, and I'm just throwing this out there. I mean, potentially as the first step of that chain of command process, it seems to me that they could easily come to some kind of a resolution with the teacher if there was an option, for instance, to have an opt-out form for a parent to say that I don't want my child to check out this book from the library, and that our technology in our library system should hopefully make that relatively simple. And I don't want to create an administrative process, but to the extent that that can eliminate the need to have continual meetings of this committee, I just think that that might be an easy solution just to throw out there as an option for parents that don't want their kids to read certain materials. That's fine.
Dennis.
So I agree with you, Robin, 100%, but our policy 6330 is limiting to books or curriculum about dissection, family life, AIDS and HIV, sexual abuse and firearms. So I don't know that it will allow parents to opt out of books which are not part of this. So I think we have a dilemma with the policy 6330 to go to this. So I think we have to keep digging. So I think honestly, for me, I am not ready to vote on this tonight. There's too many changes we're trying to do on the fly. I would like to table this for a week or to next meeting and have a finished product that we can kind of vote on. I think we have kind of a sense of the table, sense of the meeting as to what we're thinking, but I'm not comfortable voting tonight.
So what's the additional work you want, Dennis? Because we keep doing this continuously.
I understand, but I don't know.
That's why we.
But I don't know if we're voting on superintendent random, superintendent. I don't know what we're voting on.
Just the final language.
Yeah.
So.
But put out there, Dennis, what's the additional work that you want? That's why.
I just want a finished copy so I know what I'm voting. I don't know what.
You just said you're not comfortable with voting on this. So what additional work or what changes?
Are we
do you
voting
wanna
on,
make?
are we voting on superintendent random, 3 people in the school where the book is being challenged? I'm not sure what our answers are.
I just made a suggestion. I ran through it. Robin added something that you brought up a good point about it crosses over into another district. So if you want, I'll go through again what my proposal was, but we'll pause for a moment and ask Mr. Brown what he's got.
Thank you, Duke. First of all, Robin and Dennis bring up an excellent point. There is a lot of interplay between these policies. I think 6330, the opt-out, or perhaps whether that should be an opt-out or opt-in would be an excellent topic for a future policy subcommittee meeting. In terms of language here in E, I'm willing to take a crack at this right now here live with something that seems to fit what you said, Mr. Deneen, in the sense of the board at this point, and maybe we can conclude this tonight to Dennis's point, if you want to grant me the opportunity there.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
All right, so.
Thank you.
No problem. So we're going to have in E, it's going to read 3 parents of current students at the Darien Public Schools to be appointed by the superintendent. Each parent must have a student at the building where this review is taking place.
Okay, so you just simplified it, made it specific to parents associated with the building.
Correct.
Can I just
Okay.
amend to say randomly appointed or just put the word random in? So
Randomly appointed by the superintendent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Perfect.
it's an option.
And do we?
And if you didn't get it, I'm sorry, Marge, you have to look at the tape. I don't remember.
No, I,
No.
I think I'm just worried about putting randomly in. Are we going to be able to prove that to somebody who
Yes.
challenges the randomness?
Mark, I would just ask, can you trust the superintendent?
Yes.
I'm gonna ask people, give me your names. Yes, I'll see your names, but I'll put it in or random numbers to them. We'll do a random thing. And we'll do the random name. Otherwise, I'm not getting involved in who's we're selecting unless that's gonna get.
Yeah, and you're the one in the hot seat, so that's great. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. If
Thanks,
it
Dave.
makes it more, if the burden of proof is too
Right.
much, then I think it's fine.
Dennis. follow up.
So just a question on the word, Mr. Brown, of building. Does that mean if someone challenges a book at an elementary school, can it only be the person in Hinley or can someone from Holmes be on the committee?
I think that's a good point. To me, they would be,
All right,
So is it school level, grade level? What phraseology do we like there?
School
level.
School level,
Yeah, because of the elementary.
grade level?
Not
No,
really.
just school level. is fine.
so to Dennis's point, if we said school level, the challenges at the high school would be 3 high school parents. At the middle school, it'd be 3 middle school parents. If it's at the elementary schools, there are 5. Would it be 5 would it be 3 parents randomly chosen that could all put their name in from across the 5 elementary
Yes.
schools?
Fair enough.
Does that make sense, Dennis?
Yep, fair to me.
May I suggest we put that as a footnote or for example, following this exact language to illustrate the scenarios?
Yes. Good point.
Yes, and then Julie and then Jill.
Thank you. Going back to point 1, Duke, I don't think that you specified in there that the complainant will have a student in the school level where the material exists. I think that needs to be included.
I did say that.
Did you? I'm sorry.
No, let's get it clarified. I might not have said it clearly.
So kind of to
Um,
Dennis's point, there's part of me that would like to have a clean copy of this in front of me before we.
That's
go.
fine, and we can, my recommendation right now is we get a clean copy and we are ready. Any questions or concerns between now and the next meeting, but we'll get a clean copy between now and the next meeting.
Can we,
So,
Marge, can you make sure to add something to the appendix about the steps that they've taken? Thank you.
Go back to you, Dennis. Anything else? You're good? You're good? Jill?
We had some discussion last meeting about transparency and what that meant in terms of particularly the actual review process. And so I just wanted to circle back and make sure we were clear on what we're intending. So I think, step 1 of transparency is actually having the policy with the procedure outlined. Step 2 is, of course, the actual set of meetings or single meeting. Step 3 is the publication of the results. So it sounds like in terms of step 1, once we have a policy, we're clear and the policy dictates publication of the results. But I think there were still some questions about what happens during the meeting. Is it warned? Is it filmed? I don't know that I think we were maybe not in favor of it being filmed, but it was put out there. So I just want to make sure the board is clear.
So we have to notice it because it's a committee called by the superintendent, so we have to notice it, so we'll do that. And we'll do it something along with the ad hoc committees that we've had, whether it's diversity or otherwise. We've met, people can come to the meeting, they can't really participate, but they can come to the meeting. We'll notice it accordingly, we'll do minutes accordingly, but brevity of minutes, I don't see any need to videotape this, there's no need to do that, and we don't do that with all the committees, ad hoc committees that we put together, but they can certainly come and watch it and so on.
Is that clear?
Yes, it's clear to me. I don't know if that's not clear in the policy. Maybe
I think we would add that.
But-
Kind of the meeting process, just to be clear.
The statute requires it anyway.
Yeah.
To be noticed.
Right. And then the only other thing is, I think, did we all agree on Appendix A? We would add a section as to the process that they went through. Can you sketch that out? Yes, Robin.
Should they, in that appendix, also have something where they have to check a box that they've read the book?
Sorry.
I don't know if that's overboard, but just given the context of what people have been saying, I think that might be relevant.
I have no issue with
I
that.
have no issue with that.
What's that, Katie? Okay, that's fine.
And they do have to explain the nature of their complaint and what it comes. So one would hope that there is some
Sure.
depth of.
Okay, good.
explanation there.
Great, thank you. I
Can I
think we,
One more.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Actually, two more things. One's from our last meeting and one I don't think we've touched on yet. Just making sure that we think 30 days is a reasonable timeline to find these individuals, have them read the War and Peace equivalent that's raising eyebrows or what have you, and get this work done. That's a tight window. And then the other piece was, I think we needed to decide finally how we feel the report should be posted, shared, disseminated, et cetera, after.
So are you comfortable with the timeline, Dr.? Adley?
Well, I've got another, you got another 10 days after that for a response. I think once it gets beyond a month, like it just gets, you know, we lose track. of
Well, I think
everything.
it holds everyone accountable to getting it done in a timely manner. And then I think, if I remember, Julie, and we've had a lot of good conversations around this, I think we agreed that it would be communicated in the superintendent communication.
We talked about that, but
And
there was
then
some
posted-
debate about whether or not that then
Yeah.
raises questions about what doesn't get communicated in the superintendent's weekly letter.
So the legal advice
Yeah.
was to put something that specific in a policy. So then one week Alan doesn't send out a communication, he's violated the policy. So the suggestion was to disseminate to the decision to the school community, and you could work with the superintendent to figure out.
That sounds like a great.
Okay, good, Katie.
But does that mean that every decision is getting communicated out? Like, if, let's just say that we had like 4 in a row and they were all found to be baseless, then we have to go and communicate out to the,
You communicate the 4 decisions, that the process, we went through the process, and the process was that the book stays in the library. Or the reference material stays for the classroom.
That's what we've been doing today, right?
Yeah.
Would it be suffice to have him just say in his superintendent remarks? Does that count?
Well, it's kind of open at the minute, so.
Yeah, I mean.
When you say communication, Marge, I mean that the superintendent communicates every Friday. Superintendent communicates twice a month at a board meeting.
So the language disseminate the decision to the school community gives you the flexibility.
So
to
we leave it
discuss
at
with
that.
him.
We leave it at that. And to me, let's, maybe we get one, maybe we don't, but maybe we have to go through the process a little bit. And as he's coming out of the process, you can say you're going to communicate at one of your superintendent updates or through one of your Friday communications, but it leaves us enough space. Okay. All right, good. Yes,
Can I
Marge.
just ask one clarification for McCammon? We're required to notice under the Freedom of Information Act. So did you want to add any other language about the way the meeting would be conducted?
The only thing I was thinking is that I hate to add things to the policy that we don't need to add, but at the same time, people reading this need to understand the process. So, and people participating in it may need to understand the process. So if I were to raise my hand, maybe I want to know that the meeting will be noticed. Or if, so that is, historically, we don't necessarily put statutory language in, but this is also a communication tool in some ways. So I'm asking that we consider it.
Dr. Adams.
Yeah, just maybe stating the obvious, but when we talk about the school community, are we now talking about the entire school community? Because we've limited the complaint to the people who are actually in the building. So maybe now is it on the table that it's like, if it's a high school, then we put it to the high school, because that's where it was applied to. Is that
Yeah.
okay? All right, because that's the school level then, okay, all right.
So we're going to say disseminate to the school level where the challenge.
Yes.
Yeah. So then you couldn't announce it at a meeting.
Right.
Because you wouldn't satisfy the policy anymore.
Come again? Sorry.
Well, the policy says disseminate the decision to the school community. So. if
No, I
you-
would change that. You have to change that language.
Right, but then what I'm saying is that you can't announce that. I don't think you can.
So
announce
you
it
have
right
to, so you have to communicate back to the person that brought the
In writing,
challenge.
Yes.
All right, so that communication is done. And then do you just post this to the website somewhere?
Wouldn't the grade level be a subset of the school community? So if you do the grade.
If you're
level-
okay with that, that's fine.
I could, wouldn't be an unreasonable interpretation.
Okay.
In my mind.
The grade level?
School level.
School level.
School
sorry.
level, okay.
All right,
Good.
good.
Okay.
All right. Good. I think we made progress. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the questions. No, it's, look, I think we've asked all the right questions and thought through it. So Dave,
The board would so indulge, I'd be willing to make motions on the other two policies we
I'm
have.
going to do that
Can
right now.
I don't,
Thank
I don't
you.
need to hold the meeting up again,
Are you-
but the social media policy, do we want to possibly make the effective date with the beginning of the following school year? I don't know that in the middle of the school year, we have an effective way to communicate to everybody who has a district sponsored account that they need to now have a designation on it. So we did that when we first adopted this in 2015. It wasn't effective until the next school year.
Good call out. What are people's thoughts?
I think logistically it makes sense. I mean, it's probably not ideal, but I think it's really hard to enforce something in the middle of the year without.
So it would be effective 7/1/24.
We'll have a Darien Public School logo by then anyway.
There you go.
And would we also maybe have a external social media see by then? And then you can roll it all out together efficiently, perhaps.
Okay, good point. That's a good point, Julie. All right, we good? So I have to figure out this motion. May I have a motion to approve the proposed revisions to board policy 4400 social media to be effective 7/1/24. May I have a motion? Dave, second. Dennis, all those in favor? All those current. May I have a motion to approve the program? May I have a motion to approve the proposed revisions to board policy 6210, program of instruction, curriculum, textbooks, and other instructional materials? Dennis? No, that's the.
66.
Yeah, this is 62. Thanks. So Julie, second by David, all those in favor? That is unanimous. And then we are going to move 6220, challenges to instructional materials, to review of a clean copy and for action at the next meeting. All right, good. Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Good. All right, thank you all very much. We will move on to presentation and preliminary discussion of regular Board of Education meetings for 2024. Dr. Adley.
Well, just, they are as you see them there.
This is just a preliminary discussion. So any thoughts?
One
Julie,
question.
Sarah.
Why are there 3 dates in June? Is that just the way July fell? Because we're avoiding July 4th?
January 13th is, sorry, June, did you say?
Yeah, we're going 3 weeks in a row in June.
That's just the way it is, I believe, yes.
Dave.
Don't we normally have the building tour on here?
I said it's in the budget one, but Mr. Bragg.
Okay. So again, this will come back to us. So. All right. We'll move on to preliminary discussion of 2024, 2025 budget meeting calendar. I did have a conversation Monday with our partner, Jack Davis at RTM Budget. His thought was, do we have enough time for the board to do the board's work on the budget and work with the administration and ask the board's question? And should that January 12th date be pushed out further, more towards the 18th? He thought we continuously get kind of tight in terms of the board having the right amount of time to ask the board questions, the board to do the work around the budget and work with the administration on the budget. So that was the one thing that was brought to my attention. And again, preliminary discussion, so you can all read through this and think through it. And we can discuss and finalize this at the final meeting. But any initial thoughts?
It was moving the official submission of budget questions, comments, and feedback to maybe from the 12th to
The 18th.
the 18th.
That's not really, that's not a meeting, no, just for this record. That's just a
Right.
submission made, just.
That would just be a submission date, yeah. And then you'd have time.
Well, so, okay, so official submission of budget questions, comments and feedback from, okay.
But what is the purpose of that, though? Why? Sorry, why are we submitting a date? Because I think what I'm questioning though is that if they submit by January 12th, are they expecting answers January 18th? Because I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah, I guess the question is, look, I mean, and the one thing you will all have to think about is, again, I think we've got to, speak with RTM Education, RTM F&B, and Board of Finance. And again, be very specific as to, I think it's gotten better and better each year, but these questions tend to go every which way but around the budget, and they become questions about the broader topics of the year versus very specific to the budget. So I think that's something Jack wanted to continue to enable us to focus on, and for the board to have the time without getting bombarded from all these questions. So, going back to them and agreeing that, they need to hear from the board. They need to see the board do the work. The board ask the questions. A lot of their questions can sometimes then be answered as we go through our process, and then it eliminates the need. Or it simplifies the meetings with RTM Education, RTM F&B, and Board of Finance. So that was kind of the conversation, but it's a good point, Dennis. This is just, January 12th is not a meeting date. It's just a submission. So I would ask that everyone think about, when do we want to say, have any questions to us? We might say, like, let us do our work through the 23rd.
The other thing we talked about, Duke, back when we were talking about the process was, while it's extremely helpful to have a lot of questions from our partners, that sometimes it takes us off course. And so we have up to this point required, or administration has been answering all of the questions, but they haven't always been relevant to the budget process. So whether or not there's an opportunity for us to refine what actually does get answered.
Right. Well, I think my recommendation would be, the administration, the work of the board, the administration presents the budget. The board has to do the work and work with the administration on the budget. I don't think we should be receiving questions from RTM F&B, RTM Education, and Board of Finance until everyone has heard the work that we've done. Everyone's raising their hand. Go ahead, Dennis.
I think, Jill jogged my memory. I think the purpose of this was that if I'm in my memory correct, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, I thought the purpose of this was that the other boards submit their questions and we go through and check off questions that we think are appropriate and would like answered before, as opposed to that was the kind of thing, I think, the purpose of this. So this gives us time to say yes, and then we spend a weekend reading through, we present it to the administration, we get answers hopefully during the next couple of budgets.
Right,
But
and
it's not,
that brought up a question of who goes through those questions and who deems which questions get, but yes, that
was it.
Thank you for, that's right.
And I don't disagree with that, but the conversation with Jack was, the more work and the more time the board is given to do, then the less questions the board will get. So go ahead, Dave.
I might want to suggest a counter proposal that instead of having the date move out, we move in the date of the 12th to be sooner. And I would defer to our new Board of Ed member to see what her thoughts might be on whether January 5th or 6th or 8th or something like that might be tenable.
Instead of the 12th.
Yeah.
I think as a Board of Ed, if you have Super Saturday on January 6th, personally, I would want some time, I think, just for the Board of Ed to have that follow-up discussion on January 9th.
I guess I'm
Just to
asking,
have our own questions answered before you start to get the questions from all of the other.
so I guess I didn't frame it well. I guess thinking in your past role, if you had that and you were one of these groups that's submitting questions, does that sound like a reasonable amount of time?
For them to have 6 days after Super Saturday.
Could they do it in 3?
What's that?
Could they do it in 3? That's where I'm thinking. No,
I don't think so.
6.
Because I think it helps
4?
them to hear the Board of Ed have their follow-up questions, because that's also probably going to be some of the questions that they themselves would have.
Yeah, I think part of the goal and a lot of the work that Jack and Ed have done over the summer is refocusing the roles and responsibilities with these RTM subcommittees is, at the end of the day, statutorily, we don't have to answer any questions, we just have to go about doing our work of the budget. But the questions, I think, inform us as to what the subcommittees and the community are thinking about. So, Julie.
Thank you. I would support probably pushing back the date that the committees would be submitting their questions. I think sometimes the Super Saturday takes people a little while to get through and then to follow our discussions. I think we might get better informed questions if there's a little bit more window there. But I also wanted to point out, I think another part of the reason we were doing this was that then the answers to those questions can be sorted by topic rather than by which committee asked those questions. So instead of then having a packet of Board of Finance questions and a packet of RTM education questions, we have answers to questions that are sorted around, let's go to snow removal or whatever else the topic might be, which then becomes a little easier to
Rich,
follow and work.
You all did that last year. You sorted them by committee.
And it's hard because people are asking similar but different but related, but
Right.
building question, like building upon the question from another committee. So if the cabinet has the opportunity to respond to those questions from everyone on a per topic basis, I think that's more productive.
I'm sorry, Dave.
Could we have questions come in now and can randomly select a few of them?
Randomly, I like that.
I think-
Collectively.
Yes.
I think it's somewhat important that they go through a filter. The questions really are to us. They're not to administration. So, because we are the ones reviewing the board. So we need to take a look at them and then we can consolidate and say, look, there's a series of questions on snow removal, robotics, and then articulate what we think the area of exploration is. So I don't think we have to maybe sit here on the expression.
No, I think we've got all the right questions out on the floor.
Yeah.
So, and then if I, have time to talk to Ed or Jack in between or Jim Palin, I'll do that. And again, I think too, and I think, the RTM subcommittees and Board of Finance understand that it's more about, focusing on the budget, and questions associated with the budget. So, and this year also, there'll be another contract in the mix also. So, all right, good. So we'll continue that question, but I think we've asked all the right questions for this point in time. Marge, anything on the personnel report? Good. Michelle, move to public comment.
Good evening. If anyone online would like to participate, please use the raised hand icon. There are no raised hands.
Anyone in public? All right, thank you all. May I have a motion to adjourn? Julie, second by Katie. All those in favor, that is unanimous.